3 years of love, working side by side in the same company. I thought nothing could shake the foundation we had built. But then, a single, innocent question I asked a female co-worker turned into something much bigger. Suddenly, trust was questioned, pride was wounded, and the love we had nurtured for years felt fragile. Was it just a misunderstanding, or the first crack in something I believed was unbreakable? I still remember the first time I noticed her. It wasn't love at first sight, not exactly. We were both new hires at the same company, fresh faces eager to prove ourselves. The kind of people who carried coffee in one hand and ambition in the other. She sat 3 rows over from me in that bland, fluorescent-lit office space, the kind with grey cubicles and that faint smell of printer toner mixed with burnt coffee. Back then, I was nobody. Just another entry-level worker learning how not to drown in endless emails and impossible deadlines. She was the same bright, determined, still trying to find her footing. And maybe that's why we connected so quickly. There was no pretense between us. No titles, no hierarchy. Just 2 young professionals trying to figure out where we fit in the corporate world. I remember the small moments first, the way she laughed during a team lunch, how she always stayed late to finish her projects, the determination in her eyes. There was a quiet strength about her, even back then. She wasn't the loudest voice in the room, but she didn't need to be. People listened when she spoke. It started innocently, like so many office romances do. Sharing a joke during a boring meeting, walking out together after a long shift, grabbing coffee before the morning rush. Those moments built a rhythm, a familiarity. And soon, it wasn't just about surviving the workday, it was about seeing her, talking to her. Having her smile cut through the monotony of spreadsheets and corporate jargon. I can still picture the first time we went out alone. It was after a brutal week, one of those stretches where it felt like the company had no mercy. She suggested we grab a drink. I remember being nervous. Was it just a friendly gesture or something more? But the second we sat down in that dimly lit bar, surrounded by the hum of after-work chatter, I knew there was something between us. Something real. Our relationship grew in the shadows of the office, but never hidden. People knew. Office gossip spreads faster than fire, but somehow it didn't matter. We were 2 people who clicked, who found comfort in each other. The job was stressful, demanding, but having her there made it bearable, sometimes even exciting. Looking back now, it feels almost cinematic. The rise of 2 underdogs, climbing the corporate ladder side by side, hand in hand. We dreamed together, planned together. I wasn't just falling in love with her smile, her intelligence, or her determination. I was falling in love with the idea of us, the team we made together. And maybe that's why what happened later cut so deep. Because when you build your love story on trust, on the belief that you're equals navigating the same path, even the smallest crack feels catastrophic. The first months of dating her felt like living inside a secret. Not a forbidden one, but a thrilling one, like walking around with a spark in my chest that nobody else could quite see. Sure, our co-workers suspected something. The way we smiled at each other in meetings, the way our breaks always seemed to line up. The way I started drinking my coffee with oat milk because that's how she ordered hers. Office gossip isn't subtle, but we didn't care. What made it different from the stereotypical office romance was how natural it felt. We weren't sneaking around or lying to anyone. We were just us, to people who shared not only a workplace but a rhythm. I remember one Friday afternoon, the office was buzzing with that pre-weekend energy. People were rushing to wrap up projects, tie off loose ends, and then bolt out the door. She and I got caught in the same elevator, alone for the first time all day. And it was quiet. The kind of quiet where your heartbeat feels louder than your voice. She looked at me and smiled, that small, knowing smile. And right there, between floors 5 and 8, she reached for my hand. It was quick, almost unnoticeable if anyone had been watching. But for me, it was everything. That moment, I think, sealed it. We started building routines outside of work too. Weekend grocery trips, late-night drives when neither of us wanted to go home yet, watching movies on her tiny apartment couch, where the cushions sagged but somehow felt like the most comfortable place in the world. I was broke back then. Entry-level salary, scraping by on ramen noodles and gas money. She wasn't much better off, but we didn't care. Our dates weren't about fancy dinners or extravagant trips. They were about dollar-slice pizza at 1 a.m. or walking through the park with cheap iced coffee, laughing about the ridiculous emails our boss sent. Those lean years bonded us. There's something raw and beautiful about being young, ambitious, and poor together. You learn to value each other, not for what you have, but for who you are. And I valued her more than I knew how to put into words. Still, work was always there, like a third character in our relationship. Promotions dangled like carrots. Deadlines loomed like thunderclouds. Office politics swirled in every conversation. We joked that the company was our other partner, demanding, jealous, always keeping us on our toes. But secretly, I think we both loved the challenge. It made us sharper. It gave us goals to chase. One memory stands out. She stayed late one night, struggling with a presentation. I was supposed to leave, but when I saw her frustration, the way she buried her head in her hands, muttering under her breath, I couldn't just walk away. I sat down next to her, opened her laptop, and said, "Okay, let's figure this out together." We worked for hours, fueled by vending machine snacks and bad coffee. By the time we finished, it was nearly midnight. She leaned back in her chair, exhausted, and whispered, "I couldn't have done this without you." In that moment, I realized it wasn't just about romance anymore. We were partners. In work, in life, in everything. And it felt unstoppable. Two underdogs, clawing our way up, side by side. We used to sit in the cafeteria, staring at the higher-ups, the managers in their crisp suits, the directors who seemed untouchably, and we'd whisper to each other, "One day, that's gonna be us." At the time, it was a dream. Something distant, almost laughable. But little did we know, it was closer than we thought. Asterisk. Success has a strange way of creeping up on you. One day you're the kid fetching coffee and triple-checking spreadsheets, and the next, someone is handing you more responsibility, more trust, more visibility. That's what started happening to me. Slowly, then all at once. It began with small wins. A project finished ahead of schedule. A client presentation that got more praise than I expected. A manager who noticed I was staying late, grinding longer hours than most. And while a part of me resented the exhaustion, another part thrived on it. Recognition, no matter how small, was intoxicating. She noticed too. I'd come home buzzing with energy after a good day. I'd talk a little too much about my wins, my plans, my next steps. She'd listen, nodding along, proud but also tired, because she was working just as hard, maybe harder. There was one night that summed it up perfectly. We were both at my apartment, laptops open, papers scattered everywhere, two over-caffeinated warriors preparing for battle. I had just received an email from a director complimenting my work. It was one of those vague corporate emails, full of buzzwords, but still it felt like validation. I read it out loud, expecting her to cheer. Instead, she gave me a tight smile and said, "That's great. I've been pulling extra hours too, but I don't think anyone's noticed." It wasn't a fight, not really. But it was the first time I felt a shift, a reminder that we weren't just partners in love. We were competitors in a way. Not against each other directly, but in the same arena, chasing the same trophies. Still, we kept pushing forward. She landed her first big client not long after. I remember the celebration. We went out for sushi, the cheap kind, the rolls that fall apart when you try to pick them up. She was radiant that night, glowing with confidence. I thought to myself, she's unstoppable, but success is heavy. Every win meant more expectations, more late nights, more weekends lost to work. We told ourselves it was temporary, that it was worth it, that we were building something bigger than ourselves, and for a while, that was enough. Our co-workers started noticing our upward trajectory. People whispered that we were the power couple of the office. It was flattering, but also suffocating. Suddenly, every smile, every promotion, every new project was compared between us. Who was ahead? Who was lagging? Who was going to make it first? I laughed it off at the time, but deep down, I felt the weight. I didn't want us to be competitors. I wanted us to be allies, partners, but the corporate world doesn't always see things that way. Then came the moment that changed everything for me, my first real promotion. I remember walking into that glass-walled conference room, heart pounding, palms sweaty. My boss sat across from me, serious but not unfriendly. And then he said the words I'd been craving. "We'd like to move you up." It felt like winning the lottery. I walked out of that room on air, practically floating. All the late nights, the sacrifices, they had paid off. When I told her, she smiled, hugged me, said all the right things. But in her eyes, I saw something else. Pride, yes, but also something quieter. Maybe fear, maybe pressure, maybe the realization that our paths were no longer perfectly aligned. That night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling and felt a flicker of unease. For the first time, I wondered if success could be a wedge between us. I shook the thought away. We were strong. We had survived lean years together. Surely, we could survive this too. What I didn't realize then was how much that promotion would change, not just my career, but the balance of our relationship. Asterisk on the surface, life was good. Better than good, actually. We had money, now not a lot, but enough to move out of cramped apartments and into places that felt less like temporary shelters and more like homes. We could afford dinners that didn't involve coupons, vacations that didn't mean crashing on a friend's couch. I bought a decent car. She upgraded her wardrobe, sharp suits that made her look like she already belonged in the corner office. We weren't rich, but we weren't scraping anymore. And that felt like freedom. But here's the thing about freedom. It comes with a price. With promotions came more hours, more pressure, more eyes on us. I'd find myself glued to my phone at 11 p.m., answering emails that could have waited until morning. She'd spend entire weekends buried in presentations, her living room floor covered in color-coded notes. Our quality time started to feel like a calendar invite. Date nights penciled in between deadlines. Conversations cut short by ringing phones. We were together, but sometimes it felt like we were living parallel lives, running side by side, never quite slowing down enough to really look at each other. There was one evening that sticks with me. We had planned a simple night takeout, a movie, nothing fancy. I got home first, set everything up. But when she walked through the door, I could see the exhaustion in her shoulders. She dropped her bag, kicked off her heels, and collapsed onto the couch without a word. "Rough day?" I asked, already knowing the answer. She nodded. "I don't even want to eat. I just need to not exist for a while." So we sat there in silence. The takeout getting cold on the table, the movie playing in the background. I held her hand, and she squeezed it weakly. In that moment, I realized love sometimes isn't grand gestures. Sometimes it's just being a soft place for someone to land. But even in the quiet, I could feel the undercurrent. Stress, pressure, expectations. It was like living with an invisible third roommate, one we hadn't invited, but who was always there. The office dynamic didn't help. People talked. They always do. Some joked that we were the golden couple, destined to rise together. Others whispered that one of us would outshine the other, and when that happened, things might get messy. I tried to ignore it, but the words stuck. Late at night, when my mind wouldn't shut off, I'd hear those whispers replaying. What happens when one of you gets too far ahead? What happens when the balance shifts? I wanted to believe we were immune, that our bond was stronger than office politics and salary brackets. After all, we had 3 years of history built on late nights, cheap coffee, and dreams whispered in the dark. But deep down, I knew we were entering uncharted territory. Success changes people. It doesn't happen overnight, but slowly, like water shaping stone. And it was shaping us, whether we admitted it or not. Still, I clung to the good. The way she laughed when we managed to steal a weekend away. The pride in her voice when she shared a win at work. The way she curled into me at night, even after the hardest days. We were still us. Worn down, stretched thin, maybe even a little frayed at the edges, but us. What I didn't see then, what I couldn't see, was how fragile that balance really was. How one small, seemingly harmless decision could tip everything at the time. It felt like we had weathered the hardest storms. In reality, the real storm hadn't even started. When the email came in, I read it 3 times just to make sure it was real. Subject line: "Congratulations on your promotion." My chest tightened, then burst open with adrenaline. I'd been grinding for this late nights, endless meetings, proving myself over and over. And now, finally, I had it. Senior manager. Dyson. The title carried weight. Respect. A bump in salary that would have felt impossible just a few years ago. I remember leaning back in my chair, staring at the words, trying to process what they meant. All the sacrifices, the skipped weekends, the stress. It suddenly felt justified. Like I wasn't just another cog in the corporate machine. I was someone who mattered. The first person I called was her. "Guess what?" I said, barely containing myself. She paused, then laughed. "You got it, didn't you?" "Senior manager," I confirmed, my grin so wide it hurt. Her cheer was genuine, at least at first. "Oh my God, babe, that's incredible. I'm so proud of you." That night, we celebrated. Champagne, takeout from our favorite sushi place, and a toast to everything we'd survived to get here. She kissed me with a fire I hadn't felt in weeks, maybe months. For a moment, it felt like we were back at the beginning, to dreamers. Unstoppable. But promotions don't just come with new titles. They come with new expectations. By week 2, I was in back-to-back meetings from 8 a.m. until past dinner. My phone buzzed non-stop. Deadlines loomed larger, and so did the stakes. I was no longer just proving myself. I was being measured, constantly, by higher-ups who expected results. I told myself I could handle it, that the sleepless nights and constant pressure were just part of the job. What I didn't realize was how quickly part of the job would bleed into part of my life. She noticed before I did, at first. It was small things. I'd miss dinner because a call ran long. I'd scroll through emails while she was talking about her day. I'd come home so wired that even when I was physically present, my head was still in the office. One night, she called me out. "You don't even hear me anymore," she said softly. I looked up from my phone, caught off guard. "What are you talking about?" "I'm right here." "No, you're not," she said, her voice tight. "You're everywhere but here." I brushed it off, telling myself it was temporary. A busy season. A rough patch. But the truth, she was right. The distance wasn't measured in miles. It was measured in moments missed. The inside jokes that went untold. The quiet dinners that became quieter. The way her eyes searched mine, looking for the man who used to hang on every word. I thought love was enough to cover the gaps. That as long as we said "I love you" before bed, the rest would sort itself out. But love without attention is like a plant without water. It doesn't die overnight, but slowly, quietly. It wilts, and though I didn't want to admit it, we were wilting. It started with little arguments. Dishes left in the sink. Forgotten texts. Cancelled plans. But the fights were never really about dishes or plans. They were about the same unspoken truth. I wasn't showing up the way I used to. One night, it boiled over. "You think this is what I signed up for?" She snapped. "A boyfriend who's married to his job." I snapped back, defensive. "I'm doing this for us. Do you think promotions just fall out of the sky? This is what it takes." Her eyes burned. "I didn't fall in love with a title. I fell in love with you. And I barely recognize you anymore." The silence that followed was worse than the yelling. For the first time, I saw fear in her expression. Not anger, not frustration, but fear. Fear that we were drifting towards something neither of us could fix. And deep down, I feared it too. The breaking point came on a Friday night. We'd planned to meet friends for dinner. Nothing fancy, just a chance to unwind. But at the last minute, I got pulled into a call with London. It ran long too long. By the time I got home, she was gone. I found her later that night, curled up in bed, still in the dress she'd worn out. Her makeup smudged, her eyes red. "You didn't even text," she said. Her voice flat. I couldn't. It was important. She shook her head. "There's always something more important." The words hit harder than I expected, because in that moment, I realized she wasn't just talking about one dinner. She was talking about us, about the slow erosion of everything we'd built. That night, we didn't fight. We didn't yell. We just lay in silence, backs turned to each other, the space between us heavier than it had ever been. It wasn't the end, not yet, but it felt like the beginning of one asterisk. The days after that Friday night felt like walking through a frozen house. We weren't fighting anymore, but we weren't really talking either. Our words became short, functional. "Did you eat?" "What time are you home?" "Good night." Silence stretched between us like an invisible wall. I'd wake up early for meetings, tiptoeing around so I wouldn't disturb her. She'd go to bed earlier than usual, her back always turned, as if she couldn't bear to look at me. We had once been partners in everything. Now we were roommates, coexisting in the same space but living separate lives. The worst part wasn't the anger. It was the indifference creeping in, the absence of laughter, the absence of touch. I began to ask myself questions I never thought I would. Was this just a rough patch? Or were we unraveling for good? And then came the temptation. Her name was Rachel. We'd been colleagues for years. And she'd always been easy to talk to, sharp, funny, with a way of making long days at the office feel lighter. It started innocently. A quick chat about which Dyson model I should buy, then a shared laugh during a late-night work session, then lunches that stretched longer than they should have. She listened, really listened. And in a life where I felt invisible at home, that attention became intoxicating. I never crossed the line, but I thought about it. More than once, one evening as Rachel leaned in across the break room table, laughing at something I'd said, I felt a jolt of guilt, because part of me wanted more. That guilt followed me home, where my girlfriend barely looked up from her phone when I walked through the door. It was a dangerous cycle. The less seen I felt at home, the more I sought out her attention at work. I told myself it was harmless, just friendship. But in my guts, I knew it was more than that, and so did she. It happened on a Tuesday night. I'd left my phone on the counter while I showered. When I came out, she was sitting on the couch, phone in hand, eyes blazing. "Who's Rachel?" she demanded. My stomach dropped. "She's just a coworker," I said quickly. Too quickly. Her laugh was bitter. "Just a coworker who texts you at midnight, who sends you memes about how overworked you are, who knows things you haven't told me." I tried to explain, to insist it was nothing, but every word out of my mouth sounded like a lie to me. "You went to her," she said, her voice cracking, "when you didn't know what Dyson to buy, when you needed someone to talk to. You went to her, not me." The truth was undeniable. Tears filled her eyes. "Do you have any idea how that feels? To watch the person you love slip away and hand pieces of himself to someone else?" I reached for her, but she pulled back like my touch burned. For the first time, she didn't just look hurt. She looked done. That night, she slept in the guest room. I lay awake in our bed, staring at the ceiling, the weight of everything pressing down on me. My promotion, my long hours, my silence, my flirtation with Rachel, it all crashed together into one unbearable truth. I had broken something fragile and precious. The next morning, the house was colder than ever. No good morning kiss. No shared coffee. Just the sound of her footsteps retreating out the door at work. Rachel smiled at me like nothing had changed, but I couldn't meet her eyes. She wasn't the problem, not really. The problem was me. By the end of the week, we were barely speaking at all. Our once vibrant, messy, beautiful love had crumbled into ashes. And though neither of us said the words out loud, we both knew we were standing at the edge of collapse. The silence became unbearable. Everywhere I turned, I saw reminders of what we'd been, photos from trips, inside jokes scribbled on sticky notes, gifts we'd exchanged just because. Each one was like a knife twisting deeper, reminding me of how far we'd fallen at work. People congratulated me on my promotion, on my success, but inside I felt hollow. What good was climbing higher if I was destroying the one thing that mattered most at the same time? One night, I sat alone at the dining table, staring at the empty chair across from me. I thought about the first time we'd eaten together in this apartment. The way she'd laughed when I burned the garlic bread, how she teased me for weeks about it. Now there was no laughter, just silence. And I finally admitted the truth. This wasn't just happening to us. I had made it happen. The next day, I tried. I left work early for the first time in months. I picked up her favorite Thai food, the one she always craved when she was stressed. I lit candles, played the playlist we used to fall asleep to. When she walked in, she looked surprised, guarded. "I wanted to talk," I said softly. We sat across from each other, the food untouched. My hands shook as I confessed everything, how I'd lost sight of us, how I'd let work consume me, how I'd let someone else's attention mean more than it should have. "I never stopped loving you," I told her. "I just stopped showing it. And I hate myself for that." Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't reach for me. "Words are easy," she whispered. "I've heard promises before. I need more than that." It wasn't rejection, but it wasn't forgiveness either. It was something scarier, a challenge. 2 nights later, we had the conversation I'd been dreading. She sat me down, her face calm but firm. "I love you, but I can't keep living like this. I can't be in a relationship where I'm second place to your career or to anyone else." Her words cut deep, but they were fair. "I'm not asking you to quit your job," she continued. "I'm asking you to show up, to be present, to make us a priority again. Because if you can't," her voice cracked, "then I don't think we can do this anymore." There it was, the line in the sand. She wasn't threatening me. She was giving me one last chance to prove what mattered most. That night I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my chest tight with the weight of her ultimatum. I thought about the younger version of us, the one who believed love could conquer anything. I thought about Rachel, about the hollow comfort I'd sought in the wrong places. And I thought about the life we could still build if I was brave enough to choose it. The next morning, I walked into my boss's office and asked for boundaries. No more midnight calls. No more sacrificing weekends for work that could wait until Monday. I was terrified it would cost me, but to my surprise, my boss just nodded. "It's about time," he said. When I came home that night, she was sitting on the couch, waiting. I sat beside her, heart pounding. "I choose you," I said simply. "Not the title, not the money, you, every time." Her eyes searched mine, looking for cracks, for lies. And then, slowly, she reached for my hand. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet, but it was hope, and for the first time in months, I believed we might still have a future worth fighting for. Asterisk change didn't happen overnight. The first weeks felt fragile, like we were walking across thin ice. One wrong word, one misstep, and everything could crack beneath us. But we started small. Shared dinners without phones. Walks after work where we talked about nothing and everything. Sunday mornings with coffee and the newspaper. Just like we used to. Each laugh, each touch, each whispered goodnight was a tiny stitch, slowly sewing us back together. She still watched me closely, as if waiting to see if I'd slip back into old habits. And maybe she was right too. Trust doesn't rebuild on promises alone, it rebuilds on proof. So I gave her proof, day by day, not with grand gestures, but with presence. And for the first time in months, hope began to outweigh fear. But healing isn't a straight line. One Thursday night, I stayed late at the office. Just one night, I told myself. One emergency. When I came home, she was sitting in the dark, waiting. Her eyes were tired. I thought you said this wouldn't happen again. Guilt washed over me. Not because I'd done anything with anyone else, but because I'd broken the fragile trust we'd been building. We didn't fight. Not loudly, anyway, but her silence was sharper than any argument. That night, I realized something. Rebuilding a relationship isn't about never failing again. It's about how quickly, how honestly you come back from failure. So the next morning, I made changes. Real ones. No more late nights without explanation. No more leaving her to wonder where I stood, if I wanted her to believe in us. I had to prove she was worth every boundary I set. Weeks later, an opportunity came up, a chance to lead a massive project in another city. Career-wise, it was everything I'd worked for, but it would mean months away from her long-distance calls, and all the same cracks reopening. I told her about it one night over dinner. The old me would have accepted without question, but now I needed us to decide together. She put down her fork, studied me for a long time, and finally said, "What do you want?" I looked at her, really looked at her, the woman who'd stood by me, even when I didn't deserve it. "I want us," I said, "more than I want the job, more than I want the title. I want you." Tears welled in her eyes. For the first time, I saw not just hope, but relief. We decided together I'd pass on the project, not because ambition was bad, but because real love deserved to come first. Looking back, I don't see our story as a fairy tale. We didn't ride off into the sunset without scars. We argued, we stumbled. We hurt each other in ways I wish we hadn't, but we also chose each other again and again, when it would have been easier to walk away. That's what I've learned love really is. Not the grand gestures, not the perfect moments, but the choice, the daily, messy, imperfect choice to stay, to fight, to rebuild. When I see her now, laughing at something ridiculous, or falling asleep with her hand tangled in mine, I don't take it for granted, because I know how close we came to losing it all, and maybe that's what makes it stronger. This isn't the story of a man who got everything right. It's the story of a man who almost lost the best thing he ever had, and fought like hell to earn it back. And if you ask me, that's the truest love story of all. In the end, our love story wasn't perfect. It was messy, fragile, and almost broken beyond repair. But it was also real. We stumbled, we doubted, we hurt each other, but we learned. We learned that love isn't just about passion or promises. It's about presence. It's about choosing each other every single day, even when it's hard. Maybe we didn't get the fairy tale, but we got something better. The truth. And the truth is, love survives, not because it's easy, but because two people decide it's worth the fight. Asterisk.